get uniforms for their children. Timothy Otieno, KTN News.
Kenya and the European Union are locked in a bitter diplomatic dispute over claims made by the EU Chief Election Observer Mission that the Kenya government frustrated their plans to present a report on the August 8th and October 26th polls in Nairobi. The report, which indicts President Kenyatta's government over claims of using state resources in campaigns, had to be released from Brussels in Belgium. But as our political affairs reporter Murimi Mwangi now tells us, the Kenyan embassy in Brussels has dismissed the report as premature and unprocedurally released.
43 days in office following his November 28th second and final oath of office, President Uhuru Kenyatta is facing a diplomatic storm against the European Union Election Observer Mission that monitored the August 8th general election and the October 26th repeat presidential poll, marred with violence in parts of opposition zones.
The Kenyan government is not prepared to receive us within the terms foreseen in the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the EU and Kenya, because that specifies that we will present our final report within 3 months of election day.
The European Union chief observer claiming that the Kenyan government frustrated her plans to travel to Kenya, where she intended to release a report on the 2017 polls, forcing her to release the report in a televised address from the European Union Parliament in Brussels.
This is one of the very few times that a presentation of an EU election observation mission final report takes place here in the European Parliament, instead of the country where we observed, Kenya.
But the Kenyan embassy in Brussels has come out guns blazing, accusing the EU team of releasing the report in a premature and unprocedural manner, insisting the EU mission had scheduled to visit Kenya between February and March, and that the EU election observer team was reportedly to meet Wednesday to exchange views on the final report and logistics of the visit, a meeting which the embassy now says has been rendered negatory by the release of the report in Brussels.
We were entirely prepared to travel to Nairobi this week to present the final report and recommendations to the government of Kenya, as well as to other important stakeholders. Of course, the most important being the people of Kenya.
In the 75 pages report, the EU observers reported misuse of state positions and resources by both camps, but more to Kenyatta's benefit during the campaigns.
Kenyans were seen to be paid to attend election rallies. State resources were abused by both sides, but the national incumbent benefited most.
But the Raila Odinga-led National Super Alliance did not escape an indictment. The EU mission criticizing the No Elections NASA campaign that saw poll officials attacked and electoral material damaged within opposition zones.
National Super Alliance, NASA, assaulted and intimidated polling staff, attacked IBC offices, and disrupted electoral preparations. This is illegal and anti-democratic.
But the Kenya-EU diplomatic standoff over the alleged frustration of their travel to Nairobi could further complicate the country's relation with key European governments, which alongside US Ambassador to Kenya Robert Godek have been on the forefront in advocating for national dialogue following the deeply polarizing electioneering season.
And the fact that the country is not in a worse situation is entirely attributable to the Kenyan people, who do not wish to repeat violent confrontations.
Godek has been meeting key Jubilee and opposition figureheads to push for dialogue, and the EU report could as well reshape the direction of the dialogue push discourse. Murimi Mwangi, KTN News, Nairobi.
2018 is just 11 days old, and Kenyans are confronting and probably consuming more politics than they just expected. Just yesterday, the EU Observer Mission released its report on 2017 elections, a surprise report that has left tongues wagging. Still, the president is yet to name his complete lineup, and Kenyans are waiting. Is this the ultimate test for Uhuru Ruto Tuko Pamoja government? Is it the Ruto factor or KANU at play? And in NASA, things are not looking good either, even as the planned auth debt nears. Already, a section of its members are resisting the resistance. Is the auth plan spelling doom for NASA? This is the state of the nation. And joining me in studio to have that conversation to my immediate left is Professor George Wajakoya. Thank you very much. And Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala. Thank you very much for joining us here. Now, I want us to talk about the EU report. But before we do that, maybe we can just listen to the observers.
The months between the campaigning, before the general elections, and the later fresh presidential elections brought many disappointments and confrontations. Trust was lacking from the beginning, and there was more and more polarization over time. While people were largely able to campaign freely, Kenyans were seen to be paid to attend election rallies. State resources were abused by both sides, but the national incumbent benefited most from access to state resources that were used to the advantage during the campaign. Some strong and divisive words were used throughout the electoral process and intensified towards the rerun of the presidential poll. One low point was intimidation by politicians of key independent institutions. The very late legal amendments and appointment of the leadership of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, also put excessive pressure on the new election administration. Despite efforts to improve, there was a persistent lack of trust in the IEBC by the opposition and other stakeholders, showing the need for greater independence and accountability, as well as sustained communication and more meaningful stakeholder consultations in the future. Jubilee's unilateral amendments to the electoral legislation during the fresh election, harsh rhetoric against the judiciary, and acts of intimidation of civil society were highly antagonistic and not consistent with international commitments and good practice of democratic functioning. Supporters of the opposition, National Super Alliance, NASA, assaulted and intimidated polling staff, attacked IEBC offices, and disrupted electoral preparations. This is illegal and anti-democratic. The judiciary was subject to increasing pressure. It was extremely concerning that the day before the fresh presidential election, a case seeking postponement of polling could not be heard by the Supreme Court due to a lack of a quorum. This deepened concerns of political intimidation of the judiciary.
All right, now that is just the backbone of our conversation, and I'll start with you, Professor. If you can just comment about it.
Well, there's nothing much to comment because what has been told is not new to us.
Yes.
And before I say that, I would like to congratulate my senator.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that he's here with me. And I would also like to assure him that in the coming elections, should he wish to run for governor, I will not oppose him. So I'm endorsing him. But I didn't come here to endorse him but I'm just telling him because he has done a good job. Okay. And I will support him whichever way.
Thank you, Prof.
Now, coming to what you have asked, and going back to what I said before, what has been said by the EU is not actually news to us. It was there in the public domain. Both parties, that's Jubilee and NASA, were doing what they were doing, which we knew, and it has been cited by the EU. Yes. But my main concern is the weak foreign policy. And as I've said before, Amina Mohamed has really exhibited weakness in our foreign policy. If you see this kind of behavior coming out, where there is breach of protocol, Cotonou Protocol, which actually deals with the memorandum of understanding between nations, yes, bilateral relations, or whichever way it might be, and you see the kind of intimidation which has been meted by the Kenyan authorities as claimed or allegedly claimed by the EU representatives, then that puts us into a slapping momentum, yeah, whereby anything touching on Kenya, don't touch. We saw that during the ICC. We saw what happened. We saw how evidence was suppressed because of the government involvement. And now if EU can come out and say that we have also been frustrated by being allowed to go into that country, then that means that we are becoming a pariah state.
Yeah.
And the blame is on Amina Mohamed's poor foreign policy.
Okay. Senator.
I must say that I'm a sad man today because I think the levels of impunity in this country is on the rise.
Yes.
To an extent that EU can be blocked from coming into Kenya just to read and report on what they observed. And I think this impunity habit has extended to the operations of the Jubilee government. And I think it is time we have change. And that is why I believe in the course that NASA is pushing at the moment to revolutionize the thinking, the operations of the current government. Because we cannot continue being in this state whereby it is a one-man show. When the president says something, it is order. They have ignored the constitution.
Yes.
And therefore we are operating in a vacuum. We are in a very bad state.
All right. Especially, how does this look for us in terms of trade partners, in terms, Professor said economic, and, some of the recommendations that were stated, allow me to just refer to them: abuse of state resources, and then there's also the intimidation of institution, IEBC, lack of trust of IEBC. These are just the same cases we're seeing being pointed out by NASA. So how can we help ourselves as Kenya, Professor?
Well, the thing is, let Kenyans now chart their way forward. Because if the president cannot stamp authority on this kind of happenings, then that puts our nation into disrepute. It puts our trading partners or whoever wants to commit to do business with us to think otherwise. And that's why Tanzania is taking over businesses, foreign businesses in this particular region. Yes. And that's why Uganda is stabilizing. And even Somalia is stabilizing to an extent that whatever is happening in this country is shifting the paradigm of trade, the paradigm of confidence, and the paradigm of international image. Why would we, at this particular time, 50 years after independence, be rolling over in what has been happening before? Why should we have this kind of intimidations? What is the intelligence doing in this country?
Yes.
I have to blame the intelligence because they are the ones who advise the president. They collect information, disseminate that information, and they ought to be accountable. They ought to be called to parliament. And I'm sure the senator is here and is going to initiate that so that the director of intelligence should be held accountable for anything that happens that affects the image of this country.
Okay. Senator, you've talked about believing in NASA's push, but then we can see there has been trouble, brewing in NASA, the coalition. We've seen some MPs resisting the resistance. Can you comment on that?
I think the storm in NASA can be defined as a storm in a cup of tea.
Okay.
It is nothing to get worried of. Recently, we had parliamentary leadership elections, and some of these leaders who are resisting had shown interest to take over some leadership responsibilities in parliament. Unfortunately, we cannot all be leaders.
Okay.
So I think it is just a stage of recovering from what they lost, and eventually we are going to have a retreat and we are going to iron out those issues. But on the real national issues, we are really focused. We are really focused because, as you can see, in the recent past, simple service delivery has been politicized.
Okay.
We cannot be having, for example, transfer of principals to secondary schools being politicized. This is supposed to be an independent role of TSC. But now transfer of principals has been relegated to the ministry. It is Matiang'i doing everything. And therefore, we cannot continue working in such an environment. We must stop, sit down, and dialogue the best way forward for this country.
Okay, you've talked about two issues. One, the positions, and also NASA's focus. And I want us to listen to Kivuta Kibwana on those two issues.
29 recommendations for reform. These include taking actions to provide for the resilience of independent institutions involved in elections, inclusive legal reform, strengthening of the IEBC.
We do apologize for that. Now let's just listen to Kivuta Kibwana on the committee and also on dialogues. All right, we seem to be having issues. But Professor, you've had the story of Wiper complaining that there's no inequality in the coalition. What can you comment about this?
I think there should be some kind of infiltration by Jubilee into NASA. Because money is something that is so beautiful that it made somebody to hang Jesus Christ.
All right.
Some of these MPs are very hungry because they have lost a lot of money during the elections and they have a lot of debt. So if somebody can easily take advantage and get into them. Look at what Onyonga did the other day. To me, it seems as if Onyonga has got double standards, and I'm sorry to deviate to that particular level.
Yes.
We should look at many factors. Kalonzo could be right in what he's saying, but then if you look at the memorandum of understanding that was lodged by with the Registrar of Political Parties, did you have a clause to that effect, that in case ABCD happens, this is what we are going to do?
Okay.
Let's go back and look at the memorandum and then answer these questions. But if there was nothing in the memorandum, because there was that kind of opinionized kind of attitude that we are going to win the elections, and they forgot to do the thresholds, then the lawyers who prepared the memorandum of understanding ought to blame.
All right, let's just listen to that bite by Kivuta Kibwana.
There has been some disquiet regarding the sharing of House committees, and we have asked our party leader at the summit to talk about this matter, because it's not a light matter. There had been agreement between the principals about how those seats were going to be shared, so that there is equity in the coalition. There is, consensus within the coalition, and our members are very strongly expressed the sentiment that the way in which it was done in his absence when he was abroad, it was not done as they had agreed earlier. So we like that to be corrected in a harmonious manner. We are briefed by the party leader what he has been doing in terms of promoting genuine, structured dialogue. We advised our party leader as NEC that his position, after we discussed it, is a proper position, a position of going all the way to ensure that a national dialogue where people respect each other, where people are equal partners, where people put country first, that is the way to go for a country, because it's true that the country is hurting.
Senator, I'll come to you now. This is not the first time we're seeing this. I mean, there has been accusations to ODM saying that, they're bullying the rest of the coalition. What do you have to say about this?
According to me,
yes,
I think we need to look at what is important for us at this moment. Is it the parliamentary positions, or is it the bigger focus of regaining the pride of our country? First of all, I would want to ask Prof here. We share positions according to our numbers.
Okay.
And in Parliament, for example, in Senate, ODM has got 20 senators. Wiper has got 3 senators.
Okay.
ANC has got 3 senators. Now, how then do you expect ODM to share equally with a party which has 3 senators? Myself, I am elected on an ANC ticket. But I would not wish, for example, to get more slots than ODM, which has 20 members.
Okay.
Natural justice demands that ODM gets a little bit more than the other parties. As Prof said, I think this is a matter that was not enshrined in our coalition agreement. But we will sit down, we will encourage dialogue, and I think this matter might be sorted out very soon by the principals at the summit level.
Okay.
If we leave it to politicians, we will destroy even the little that we had built in the recent past.
Okay.
But I would like, and I even wished that the Wiper NEC addressed issues of electoral reforms, addressed issues of police brutality, as opposed to going to discuss about opposition. Because all Wiper is looking for is a chief whip. So you cannot call a NEC meeting just to discuss and lament about the position of a chief whip, and yet we've got serious national matters to address.
Okay, all right. We want to take a short break here on Morning Express, but when we come back, we want to talk about the nurses swearing-in plan, which is on January 30th, and also we want to talk about the Jubilee and the 13 cabinet secretaries that are supposed to be named the 22. We take that break first.